Well, hello, good evening. Welcome to another wonderful virtual event with the Norwich Bookstore. We're glad you are joining us from wherever you're tuning in this evening. My name's Sam. Some of you may recognize me either from in the store if you're local to the Upper Valley here, or you might recognize me from these virtual events. We do a couple of these a week. I work at the Norwich Bookstore, and I am delighted to welcome you all here. We are really excited to be here with a couple of beloved and acclaimed Vermont authors who we're really excited to be supporting and really excited to be hearing from tonight about their new collections, one of poetry, one of short stories. And I am excited to see the way these two books kind of entangle in conversation and the way these two writers converse and discuss their work. I am so happy to see all of you joining us. One of the great things about these virtual events is that you can tune in from anywhere in the country, not just here in Vermont, here in the Upper Valley. So if you're joining us from far and away, let us know where you're from in the chat. We'd love to see who's joining us and from where tonight. And again, thank you so much for tuning in. We are the Norwich Bookstore. We're a independent bookstore here in the Upper Valley of Vermont in Norwich. We've been here since 1994, and we're here near Dartmouth College and King Arthur Flower. And we hope that you'll come visit us sometime on Main Street in Norwich. We're open 7 days a week and always happy to see us. So stop on by, and I'll drop a link in the chat to our website and our operating hours. Now, tonight we are here to celebrate two wonderful recent books by wonderful Vermont authors. It's what we do. We celebrate books, we read them, we talk about them, we share them with each other. And so tonight we are going to be putting links in the chat to purchase these books. The books are Fetch Muse, the new collection from Rebecca Starks, out recently from Muse Press, and Prepare Her by Genevieve Plunkett, which is new from Catapult Books, our friends at Catapult Books, recent this year. And though we're going to drop links in the chat to both of those books, we hope that you'll pick them up from us tonight. Your book purchase is what keeps this virtual events program going. It is what keeps the lights on at our bookstore. It is also what keeps writers like Rebecca Starks and Genevieve Plunkett writing and touring and putting out new material. And we are so grateful for your support. You can pick up a book and have it shipped to you anywhere in the country via USPS Media Mail. You can have one held for you at our store, or we will even put one on the porch for contactless porch pickup if that's your jam. But again, we really appreciate you supporting these local authors and supporting us. Now, tonight, at the end of the event, if you have questions for either of these authors, we really hope that you will put them into our Q&A, which is at the bottom of the screen. If you check out your toolbar at the bottom of the screen there's a Q&A button. You can click on that, type in your question, and we will get to as many questions as we can at the end of the event. Alternately, you can put your question into the chat, and I will be monitoring there too. We'll get to as many questions as we can. Now, like I said, we host a lot of events here at the Norwich Bookstore, a couple a week throughout the course of the year, and there's sure to be something else that you'll enjoy. So I hope that you will follow us on social media. If you enjoy tonight's event, we're at the Norwich Bookstore on most major platforms. And you can also check out our email newsletter. I'm going to drop a link in the chat to that. Sign up once a week. You get a free email telling you all about what we've got coming up, and we're announcing new events and new happenings all the time. So we hope to see you back here. And thank you again for joining us. And now I am delighted to introduce two authors I've been very excited to work with this January. We are here tonight with Rebecca Starks and Genevieve Plunkett. Their new books are Fetch Muse and Prepare Her, and they are both Vermont writers through and through who have been garnering acclaim from all fronts, all over the place, and they have some wonderful connections to one another that I think they're going to talk about a little bit, and that I think you'll be enjoying hearing about. Rebecca Starks is the author of Fetch Muse, her most recent collection, and Time Is Always Now. Both of these are out from Muse Press. Her poems and short fiction have appeared in the Ocean State Review, Crab Orchard Review, Tahoma Literary Review, Slice, many other publications. She's past winner of Rattle's Neil Postman Award for Metaphor and Poetry Northwest's Richard Hugo Prize, and she co-founded Mud Season Review and serves on the board of the Sundog Poetry Center. I'll drop a link in the chat to that wonderful organization tonight. She works as a freelance writing consultant and workshop leader, and she lives with her family and two adopted dogs in the woods of Richmond, Vermont. And joining us as well tonight is Genevieve Plunkett. She's the author of Prepare Her from our friends at Catapult Books and In the Lobby of the Dream Hotel, which is forthcoming in 2023. A winner of an O. Henry Award, her work can also be found in New England Review, Southern Review, Crazy Horse, Colorado Review, Electric Literature, and Literary Hub. She lives in Southern Vermont with her two children. Please, from wherever you're joining us tonight, join me in extending a warm Upper Valley welcome to Rebecca Starks and Genevieve Plunkett. Thank you.
Thank you, Sam, so much for that. And I'm sorry that we're not all in the Norwich bookstore, which I've actually never been to in person, but I've heard a lot about. And a close friend of mine said she bought my book from the Norwich bookstore, and this was before this event, and it piqued my interest. So I started following them before we made plans to do this. So it's really exciting for me. I'm going to start reading tonight, which we just decided, and then Rebecca's going to read, and then we're going to talk a little bit, and as we said, have a great conversation. So I'm going to read from the last story in my book, Prepare Her, the story, Prepare Her, and we'll see how it goes. All right. The girl has to poop, Rachel tells the school. Doctor's orders. This last bit is not a lie, although it feels like one, maybe because Rachel has never said doctor's orders in her life. There's also something questionable, rebellious even, about the idea of keeping her daughter home when she is not contagious. Poor thing, says the school's director. We'll be thinking of her. We'll be sending her positive vibes. Yes, I will let her know, Rachel says. And as she hangs up the phone, she decides that she will indeed tell her daughter this. She has tried every method that she can think of: prunes, warm baths, hot drinks, promises of chocolate chips and sodas. There have been scare tactics, which Rachel regrets, threats of having to go to the hospital, of complicated, invasive measures. She might as well let her daughter know that her whole preschool is rooting for her. Bianca won't be embarrassed, Rachel thinks. Or is it that Rachel has forgotten that shame is an opportunist, its means subtle and unfair? When she was Bianca's age, she watched her mother drop an egg on the kitchen floor. It landed with a slap of yellow, leaving a thin snot-like thread across the toe of her shoe. This had filled her with humiliation, as if the thing had come from her own body, like some kind of unsightly discharge that was beyond her control. She began to cry, and then to wail, and her mother did not know what to do with her. I don't know what to do with you, her mother said. Rachel's sorrow was unrecognizable, alien, dysfunctional. Downstairs, Bianca is on the couch nibbling a piece of celery. The television is showing some kind of nature program, a volcano erupting, veins of bright orange lava against a matte black earth. I would just walk around the lava, Bianca says haughtily. The celery hangs from her mouth. She has not actually ingested any of it, but has only bitten the tip into a wet, stringy mess. They have been to the doctor, who has suggested making things like poop muffins with bran and psyllium husk, simple, wholesome measures that Rachel is certain they are now beyond. Bianca has refused the toilet for 5 days. The pain comes in sharp, urgent waves, and still she refuses, clenching her fists, dancing on her toes, anything to keep herself from going. This has become a psychological struggle, Rachel realizes. The solution is somewhere in her daughter's head, which is already at 4 years old filled with strange, fiercely sophisticated ideas. On the television, a scientist in a fire-resistant suit pokes a stick into one of the lava flows and pulls it up slowly as if he is stretching taffy. It does look harmless. It all looks so slow and harmless. Rachel has been living with her mother now for 6 months, ever since she and her husband separated. Rachel's mother is hurt and perplexed by the separation. It was entirely Rachel's fault. It was not toxic and voluminous like her mother's divorce. There's nothing impressive and darkly human and novelistic about the way her daughter's relationship deteriorated. It simply ended without mystery or confusion. A waste. Rachel herself is not pleased with the way things have turned out. For one, she wishes that her mother's house were not so far from town. She feels helpless out here, buried in snow beneath the creaking trees, the steep, forbidding face of the mountain. She keeps forgetting to buy things at the grocery store, ingredients that slip her mind during the 30-minute drive. When she arrives back and remembers that they are still out of peanut butter or baby carrots or dish sponges, she feels a sort of desperation as if she is starving. She opens bags of potato chips, thrusting her arm noisily inside while setting groceries on the shelf. She can't stop. She is starving. Rachel writes for a magazine, which was fine while she was living off her husband's income. She felt a rush of false opulence whenever she opened a check, this marvelous piece of extra money that represented her independence, the heroism of late-night multitasking. But now she feels that the money holds little significance. She has just finished writing an article about coffee, how it does not pair well with fruit. She contacted experts on the subject, experts with headshots that were somehow both angelic and murderous. They told her that coffee did not taste good with fruit. Too much acid, they told her. She had written the article despite being sick and having to care for Bianca, who was also unwell. Most likely the flu, the doctor said, but knowing for sure won't make a difference in how I treat you or how you feel. Yes, thought Rachel, it will. She took Bianca back home, and they wrapped themselves in a blanket on the couch, and when her mother returned from her job at the hospital and walked wearily across the living room dangling her keys, Rachel called out, "We have the flu," because it would make a difference to her mother, whose sympathy was contingent on that sort of thing. It is not just the separation that Rachel's mother disapproves of. When her mother is at home, she holds a constant, irritable vigilance. She opens the refrigerator and peers inside, challenging its contents, shaking the milk carton, peeling open the lid to the yogurt to check its level. She steps over toys left on the floor with great elderly sighs. At the table, she quizzes Bianca on hypothetical moral dilemmas. If you had 4 chocolate chips, but Nana only got 2, what would you do? I would build a wall around my chocolate chips so you didn't see. Rachel's mother looks at Rachel over her granddaughter's head, a deeply troubled, warning look. There's something that Rachel hasn't tried, something that she has been avoiding. The doctor advised letting the child do it herself. At 4.5, she has the dexterity, said the doctor. Dexterity. It is a clean, mechanical sounding word that does not take into consideration her daughter's stubbornness, her skepticism, her outrageous, practically feral imagination. On the television, the volcano is still spurting lava, thickly and sluggishly. Bianca watches rapt, the chewed stick of celery discarded beside her on the couch cushion. I have something that might help, says Rachel, switching off the television. She clasps her hands together, fortifying herself against insult and objections. But Bianca is not insulted. In fact, she is surprisingly eager to try. Rachel watches a mature and businesslike hope settle over her daughter's face as they walk holding hands to the upstairs bathroom. It occurs to her that Bianca has reached a degree of suffering that has made this resolve possible. She, a child who won't even try a new flavor of ice cream for fear that it won't be her favorite, will do this strange, unheard of thing because she wants to stop the pain. Rachel feels this reality seep into her chest like a leak, warping and blistering a wall, the damage of another small heartbreak. In the bathroom, Rachel takes the cap off the suppository and hands it to Bianca. It is a clear plastic bulb with a long tube or spout at the end. The girl takes it, looks at it with cool consideration, and points the tip toward her bottom. Now what? she asks. Well, Rachel says, first of all, you have to move it closer. Like this? Closer? Like this? Even closer. Bianca is confused. When do I squeeze it? She asks. When it is in, Rachel says. In where? It is here that Rachel begins to suspect that her daughter has been misled in some way. She recalls their brief conversation downstairs, examining it for errors or ambiguities. No, she thinks I explained it properly. She knew what she was getting into. Rachel struggles for a moment. She does not want to use any terminology that might alarm the girl. Hole, she says. It's the best that she can do given her options. What hole? The one in your bottom. A nervous, imperious fury begins to take over Bianca's features. She drops the suppository on the floor. I do not have a hole in my bottom. Rachel exhales. She's been poised encouragingly on her knees, but now she sinks down, resting her palms against the cold tile. It is not her own biting, self-critical voice that she hears at first, but her mother's, followed by her husband's. How could you let her reach this age without knowing? This is basic anatomy. This is vital to a proper and healthy self-image. You have failed to prepare her, they say, although Rachel has only a feeble, closed-minded understanding of what this means. Prepare her. It means more than she wants to. She's on the verge of something terrible, something unspeakable when she laughs. Okay, she said softly. We don't have to do this. I'm going to stop there. Thank you.
Thank you, Genevieve. Okay, I love Genevieve's story. I just want to say that I met her, I first met her through her work when I was editing Mud Season Review, and we loved her story instantly, and it was the first one she had published, so it's been fun to watch her.
You can still find it online, called Get
Yes.
Gregory Out, although sadly it didn't make it into the book, but I love it still, and it's fun.
Yeah.
But anyway, I'm really eager to hear you read these poems aloud, which I've been reading this whole week to myself.
Thank you. Yeah, and I want to thank also Sam and Emma in Norwich Bookstore for being so generous and energetic with their reading series. It's been really hard for authors to read during the pandemic, but they do an amazing job of hosting. And next time we are down that way, I look forward. Normal times we do travel down that way a fair amount, and so I look forward to stopping in. And Genevieve, thank you for being willing to read with a poet. It's funny that somehow the genres get so like separated out that I'm super happy to read with a fiction writer.
Yeah. So
I'm going to read a selection of poems that gives a bit of the narrative arc of Fetch Muse. It is a narrative of I guess what I call a star-crossed love affair with a dog, and about the kind of vulnerability and responsibility that come with that connectedness. While we were in Portland, Oregon, not yet married, my partner and I adopted a 6-month-old Aussie Rottweiler mix. And we were pretty new to dogs. And this one turned out to have significant behavioral and medical problems. So it was going to be rocky anyway, but then a year and a half later, we became parents, and we were also very new to babies. So that's sort of the background that from some of the poems that you won't be hearing. I'm going to put a link in the chat to a Google Doc that has the poems I'll be reading, in case it's hard for you to listen and like hear poems for the first time as they go. So hopefully that will work. And if not, just listen. And a note on the form first, most of the poems are unrhymed or mostly unrhymed sonnets. And when there's a you in the poem, it's addressed to the dog herself, and also kind of as the muse of memory. The first poem I'll read shares a title with a dog owner's manual by Patricia McConnell. And soon after bringing the dog home, we discovered she had disabling hip dysplasia. The other end of the leash. The truth is, I hate imposing constraint, strapping toddlers in car seats, forcing pills down a cat's throat, opening the bedroom door before a sleeper's breath has fully risen, on anyone but myself. No longer free, I wanted you to fly, possessed by nothing but the bounding, boundless joy we'd nearly lost while we stood calcifying on the sidelines. So much for vicarious transcendence, that one last fling. You'd be instead a mirror of our hardships, evasions, and displacements. From then on, whenever we watched you run, all we could see was the pain, punishing, impersonal, you tried so hard to run from. This dog was also the beginning of the end of my improbable job at the time. I was telecommuting for a New York company. And that's the basis of the next poem. Default setting. Through months of rain, my job grew more remote. Contacts corroded, negotiations stalled in a backlog of futures, options, swaps. Your needs more pressing, psychic, uncompromising. Instead of pros and cons, I worked on you. Seize the squeak toy, nod it into the hamper, fetch it out, then dash to the ringing phone and lift it from the cradle. You'd sashay back, keeping just out of reach, refusing to drop before the dial tone. When Andy came home, I'd have you leap and give the door a shove with both front paws, then whirl back for applause. What couldn't I teach you but the sterner laws? What couldn't you learn when it was taught with love? Wasted wish. With time, I've come to value the commands I never thought to give for things you did quite well, but never at the times we wanted. Relax for when I couldn't take you out right then, or bark by which you'd come to know its quiet opposite. Stand to let a vet manipulate your hips, and watch to hold the portal of your mind open to our cues. I learned from watching trainers at the zoo that what my dad forbade as tricks are tricks on those who don't suspect their purpose. Shake, no clowning circus act, but a feint letting a man draw a thorn from a lion's paw. When you limped, I wished I'd never taught you heal. So the book has 3 sections, dog, child, and muse. I came to see them as the 3 kind of competing commitments I had to juggle and come to terms with. So the next few poems are from that middle section, child. It's partly about becoming a mother and the radical adjustment of identity that came with that. Misconception. From the moment I saw the double line, I was struck that I was body, a woman's, blind to how I identified as mind, intent on choosing how it was occupied, slow to admit what doubt could not dislodge. Once I was pregnant, my mother thrilled to say, everything I did was full of purpose, eating, sleeping, nurturing the life within. I was too ashamed to say I'd felt that way about my mind, prepared to be a writer's, and now deprived of any other aim, but keeping off things that had no hope to change, only endure like a long illness, brooding on that which hadn't lived, yet might still die. So the book as a whole is written, I sort of had this epic idea that it was not seriously, but in some ways recapitulating Milton's Paradise Lost and this sense of, and this next poem is really about my childhood myth of what it means to be fallen, to think about our feelings and to feel we have to justify them. So that just a reminder of the opening lines of Paradise Lost, the title comes from them, of man's first disobedience and the fruit of that forbidden tree whose mortal taste brought death into the world and all our woe. Mortal taste. When she stopped eating, I brought her inside and holding her in my lap, read from the page where Hazel hops away from his still body until she stretched out, breath ending in a rasp, and her litter mate prodded at the towel to bury her. I was aware of my mother in tears and my father turning away. Night after night, I cried behind my shut door until my father stopped me in the hallway, or was it out on the broken brick walk? The memory restores its surface tension both ways, but then he often repeated himself to tell me I wasn't crying about my rabbit, but about the time I missed spending with her. He taught me something I want to pass on. If you want to stop crying, don't think happy, think evil. The way when you taste something bitter, salt is a better antidote than sweet is. Now it's clearer to me. Upstairs, his mother was dying. Later that month, he would wake us and lead us to where she lay, her eyes part pearl. Each spring, I'd move my rabbits from the garage to an outdoor hutch where the breeze could reach them, ears and noses twitching, feet thumping alarm, alert to a world where I read poems over one I couldn't taste, like the wild clover. The salt wheel rattled. When they shunned my hands, I stopped eating meat, their silence, my conscience. Now it is clearer to me. I conflated my rabbit's sentience with my own cosmic no. No, truer to say, some people will always think of grief, think of it, the way lawyers think of trust, economists of generosity. Truer to say, attuned to her soul's wildness, mine had grown. I think of it now, reading of the children warehoused on the border, orphaned by law. What am I crying for? I've spent so little time thumping my foot on that cement floor, sick of the same stale food, looking at no windows, deciding how to use my one rough blanket. And when I stop, what taste has worked its cure? So when I wrote the first draft, I wrote sort of a straight blank verse narrative in these 14-line segments. And then later I decided I wanted to tell the story more discontinuously, more lyrically. So I kept some sonnets, and it really shaped them more into sonnets, and then took out the rest of the material, but I kept some of more narrative material as bridges between to give context. And so the next poem is one of those, and it shows how our life began to shrink with this dog and the stakes got higher. It also gives away the dog's name, which has been kept hidden up to the point. We tried to change the name, but events conspired against us. So we decided it was fate. Voice control. Kismet, indeed. I hear a woman snap after you've lunged full-throated at her, snapped back by the leash just in time. She would come around a corner and surprised you more than me. By then I was all reflex, my mind numb, though the first time shocked me into acting shocked to run up against my quickened fear of the fear I'd caught hints of, unarticulated, low growls, but nothing so blatant as this disaster. Trotting ahead of me off leash along Lower Maclay, in a blink you seized, hackles up, legs braced, barring the way, barking and snarling at a man whose adrenaline rushed to rebuke. You have a vicious dog. I bristled at the gross exaggeration, hooked the leash on its ring, then apologized in the Greek sense, defending the status quo, the state in which we now would find ourselves. Shaken enough to keep you tied to me, or was it the reverse, myself to you? She just got scared. At which the man unleashed, berating me as I jogged on up the trail with lowered eyes until my heart could buoy and match our pace again. He just got scared. You came along calm until the next loose rock triggered another bull-throated barking fit. So that is how Kismet treats me in this country, the Turkish man on Belmont scathing, pissed, reminding us this Portland hippie name had deeper roots that tapped the will of Allah, how he divided lots. Friend, enemy, you divvied up the world so readily. You had defenders, dog people loved you, hands down. You were a real dog lover's dog, and you loved them back, sidled into them exuberant, lapping up the coos, a joy to those who could receive you in that light. This sharp-heeled woman wasn't one of them. Just watch him around the baby, her parting shot, as she appraised us coolly, our weak link. And now a story, post-child, a poem from post-child time. Prayer. That most of what I said you understood, whether or not you heeded. I know because when I step out over a chasm, blind, I can walk only as far as I can feel against my feet, the plank's attentive yield. Before an infant's gape, I couldn't speak motherese, only hum. Nor can I pray, though once I could before that crossing closed. But I could talk to you so easily, a jostle of sounds riding you bareback, as in my childhood dreams of turning back wild enough to tame the wildest animals. And even when I slid off, you answered, trotting to the window to see the doggy, you. The next poem is one that steps out sideways to touch on other losses that sort of resonated with this relationship too. Harvest Moon. Ever since a psychiatrist schooled me in the kind of loss he called ambiguous, telling me someone I loved would never be herself again, gone but not gone, there but not there, I keep expecting sun on sawdust, a clear-cut loss. But whatever I lose haunts until it dims to memory. My grandma, wearing her bathrobe of light blue denim, hovers as I set out spoons or wipe the counter, takes my hand for grace before adding a sprig of watercress to a drab plate. Washed bright as the harvest moon, we watched rise with her blinds to reveal the bay swept free of clamors when the mudflats brimmed. And I'll end with the title poem of the collection, Fetch, Muse. Fetch, Muse, bring me back what I rejected. Let me stay stationary as the sun at either solstice while you do the work of memory, dropping life at my feet. The hardest part, relinquishing your hold without worrying what you carry dead. Learning to love the shuttle back and forth, for the canvas weave it tightens with each turn. Fetching, a Janus word used of a boat, plying a course or veering, of in-breath or sigh. Fetch, a measure of how far the wind blows, how far waves scud ahead without interruption, swelling until they stumble upon shore. Your fetch as long as your leash pulls you up. Thank you.
I'll clap. It's so weird not having an audience.
I know it's strange.
But thank you so much. I've been waiting to hear those read aloud because many of the poems that you read were ones that I went back to even before I knew what you were planning to read. So I just love this collection so much. And one thing that it really makes me feel that you're addressing is this. I wrote this down because it came to me in a flash, but the unspoken injustices of being human. And you're doing this with in so many ways, but through the body language and just the presence of this dog throughout. And it was just really thrilling to see you do that in a storytelling sense in ways that I had never thought of as a writer. So you actually kind of answered my first question. I was going to try to open this a little more straightforward with just a very kind of technical question, which was about how this book of poems became a book of poems to you in your mind, if it started out like that, or if you slowly realized that this was the direction you were headed. Do you mind? I know you talked about this a little bit, but do you mind talking a little bit more?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I started working on it after we had left. I guess it was probably about 3 years after the end of the book, so to speak, that we moved from Portland to Burlington. Mm-hmm. And I remember writing. I had a 6-month-old and a 3.5-year-old, and I remember writing on the floor of the bathroom, like at night so I wouldn't disturb anyone. The cat would be in there sometimes, and somehow it became a way. I think because I felt like there had been a number of losses that I never had time to catch up with, and so somehow addressing the dog became a way. Everything became centered in her somehow that, and having to make that choice of giving up someone that we were so attached, a dog we were so attached to. I don't know, it was just a wound that hadn't healed in some ways. So I just started writing it, and it doing that epic form. There were like 7 sections I remember, and each one was like stay, fetch, home, like a command to a dog. And but I had them in these, and then there were about, I think it was like 256 of these sonnets, basically. So it was very long, and it was exhaustive of anything that my memory could pull up. So it was too much. And I mean, at various points, I had people help me with it and help winnow it down. And then at some point I was thinking maybe a chapbook, but then it really did feel like I had enough other, I don't want to say it's not just about a dog. I think that relationships with dogs are important. Like I think it's real, and but it also had other aspects to it that I wanted to bring in. So it definitely was a 10-year process overall of kind of getting distance from it and shaping it.
Yeah, I can tell that it has that depth of time. Yeah, I mean, you're right. It's not just about a dog. I mean, the dog just bridges kind of so many different human voids, and questions that can't be voiced. And I'm so impressed. And it's so satisfying too. I promise I'll stop raving about it, but I just really wanted a chance to tell you, writer to writer, that I love being surprised like this at how a story can be told.
Well, I would love to do that back to you if that's okay.
I guess so.
And then I'll let you ask. I know you had other questions too.
Yeah.
But I think so. I'm going to start sort of similar to you. So Megan Mayhew Bergman, a wonderful writer who we both know, mentioned Sylvia Plath in connection with your writing, and I see her like in the metaphors, which I want to talk about also, and in like in the dissociative states of some of the characters, and its sensibility. But I also see Emily Dickinson, who's it was sort of my early poetry love, because there's some way that that you tell it slant that also to me is it's completely surprising, and I keep trying to understand how you've done it, and it just slips past me every time as I reread the stories. It's like if they feel irreducible to me. Like if someone asked me to tell what they were about, I would just have to tell it exactly as it happened again, which is what poets hope, it's the way people talk about poetry. And it will start somewhere. It just seems to go, it always goes somewhere unexpected. And it feels almost, and I don't know if tell me if this sounds like or if you can explain why this is, but it feels almost like a shell game of various threads. And only at the very end do we know where that kernel, where the kernel is, and kind of where we're going to end up, even because it's not just about the mother trying to get the child to poop. That's not, that happens in the story, but this idea of prepare her, and partly it's metaphoric, but there's also just some amazing way that you move in time, and by this sort of slant rhyme associations that I just really enjoy reading. Anyway, that's not a question yet, but I was wondering, like, as a writer, how do you, I'm curious about how you do it, but you don't have to give anything away, but also how do you stay within the story and avoid kind of peeking beyond and kind of knowing too much as you write the story? Because to me, that's what it feels like, is you never let yourself know too much while you're writing it.
That's kind of eerie, because I don't know, it's like you've peeked inside my brain, because you're exactly right. I want to pedal back a little bit, and I'm just, what you said about if someone asked you to describe or narrate what the story is about, I was thinking of saying just that verbatim about your poems. It's like this is the way it's delivered, and this is and that's the only way that I can that it can be delivered. But yeah, when I write, I like how you said that, about how do I stay in it without getting too far ahead. I'm not sure, but I guess I can say that I really, really honor my subconscious when I write stories. And planning and logic, the more that I try to figure out the parameters of a story, or where it's really going to begin or where it's really going to end, the more I feel suffocated by it, the more it kind of becomes trite to me. And so I get scared of boxing myself in to a story that I don't want. And I think I've stayed pretty true to this as I've written, and as I've written a novel after this, that I don't really want to know what I'm doing while I'm doing it. It's kind of like, for some reason, I'm thinking of Perseus holding the mirror and looking at Medusa in the mirror, you know,
Yeah.
like
Yeah,
I don't
yeah.
want to look directly at the thing or else I'm just not interested.
I noticed that as a theme. So that's one of the stories, Gorgon. And I
Yeah.
really saw that very powerfully, that feeling of like not, there's something that you're not, the characters are not looking at, and maybe the author's not looking at that. And it just creates a great sense of, I don't know, there's this underlying danger feeling, and there's this interest and suspense in it. And when you're done, you go back again to see how did we end up there from where we started. That's great.
Yeah. I'm actually this flows right into a question I want to ask you. And it's more, you know, I love talking to poets because it's different for me. I know a lot of poets, you know, or a lot of writers write in different genres. I'm not one of those writers. I'm completely bewildered by by poetry and by nonfiction and, you know, any of the other fiction genres. I don't know how anybody does it. So I want to know, because your poems do that thing where it's like I'm getting the glint of the gem, you know, but I'm not seeing the whole thing. And I'm just wondering, how do you keep that potency when you're forming a poem? Do you see it in your head? I guess when you're working on a poem, what is it about that particular poem that's grabbing you and telling you this is what needs to be pursued? And then how do you stay in that? In one of your poems, you talk about surface tension. I love that image, but how do you stay within the surface tension of the poem? And kind of asking you the same question, basically.
I see. Yeah. I think one way I might answer is why I choose to write in form, and in this book in particular, in this sonnet form. And so to have some kind of constraint on me helped. And I think like the sonnet form for me is a form of paradox of there's a turn, right? You think one thing and then you sort of turn that back on itself. And to me, that's just how my mind naturally works. Maybe everyone's that way, but you think one direction and then you see the other side. It could be someone else's point of view or another point of view you remember. And somehow I think that the answer is somewhere in that, to where there's some kind of quarrel with myself, as Yeats would say, or something that is there at the forefront that I'm working out. I don't know if I can say any more than that. It's really hard for me to remember how that, and like there's so much work that goes on after that initial writing. Yeah. Also, like a lot of, you know, there's like, just to try to get out slack parts or cliched language, or especially something that I wrote in such a long rush, there was a lot of revision of these poems, I would say.
I can understand that. Do you sit, I'm wondering, and you don't have to answer this, but where do they enter your mind? Are you outside? You're moving a lot in your poems. And I just have a sense of you going out for a run and suddenly a poem, you know, jumps on for a ride or something, or maybe you sit at your kitchen table. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, well, so that when I was sitting on the floor for those, but often I do work out poetry during my runs. So like I'll work on something really, or anything I'm working on, I work on it, and then when I take a break and go moving, you know, getting moving, then that's when I work out the phrasing or something that's giving me trouble. I need a word. I know I need a particular word, and I find it if I'm moving. So yeah.
I can relate to that too.
Should I ask you another question about?
I think so, yeah.
Or unless we're gonna run out of. I mean, I have a question about your writing process too. I remember seeing once that you didn't have a computer. This may not be true anymore, but that you were writing your stories on your phone. And I'm curious, like I can't imagine trying to do that. And I wonder if you think if that affects your writing at all, and if it changes once you do write on a computer, and also how for a novel, if you had to be a little more thought out writing a novel, which I'm really excited to read in a couple of years too. Or a year. But
yeah, in a year. Yeah, I did write. You're right. I wrote on my phone because I didn't have a computer. And but also you know that writing is actually a lot of reading over what you've already written. So when I wrote a lot of my short stories, my children were babies. So there's a lot of lying in the dark or breastfeeding with one hand. And so the phone kind of became, well, I can go through the story this way, and think about the story while I'm juggling children. I didn't type it out on the, like, I didn't thumb it out. I had a little keyboard. So there's that. And I did a lot of handwriting too. And then it kind of felt wonderful, very practical in a way, because when I sold Prepare Her, I also it was a 2-book deal, but I hadn't written the novel yet. And I was like, there's no way I can write a novel on my phone. So with the advance money, I bought a computer, and it just all felt very wonderful in that way, like a new start. And so I had the computer for writing the novel, and because the edits were intense for that. So
yeah, once you get to the editing, I can't imagine how you do that. Yeah, that's great.
Do we have, I don't know, what do we do for time? I have more questions for you. I don't, if people have questions they want to ask.
Yeah, likewise.
Look, Sam's jumped in. Thank you.
I have. Well, I've been just enjoying hanging out back here and listening to both of you and listening to you chat. And I'm seeing in the chat here tonight that people are really kind of tuning into that as well. We do have some audience questions, and I wondered if I could throw them at you in the couple minutes we've got left. Thank you both so much, by the way, for reading tonight, and I'm so excited to hear what's next from each of you as well, and I'll want to ask a little bit about that in a second, but definitely we are excited to have you guys both back at the Norwich Bookstore someday, and hopefully in person as well. We got a couple of great questions from Michael here. One for Rebecca. We'll start with this one. Michael asks, how do you start a poem? Do you have an idea and then put down the words, or do you discover the theme as you go along?
That's always, like I said, somehow it's really hard to capture that beginning moment for me. It's so interior. I think that I feel like I'm kind of making it up to give an answer, but the made up answer is sometimes there's an idea, a connect. I think that's sort of like a haiku moment often, of where you connect like the human and natural worlds, or just one thing reminds me of something else, and then it's trying to understand why one thing reminded me of something else. I see relationship with a dog, and I suddenly see, oh, that's like my relationship with this failed romantic partner, or like, and then it's trying to work it out. And then sometimes there is something, there's just a line will come to me, or even just certain words that I'll be working with. So it can happen different ways.
Thank you. And a similar question from Michael for Genevieve about coming up with ideas. Michael asks, are the ideas for your stories based on experience, imagination, or a combination of both?
Yeah, quite often my experiences are formed by imagination. So I would say definitely a combination of both. I really can relate to Rebecca with that. Where does it come from? You kind of forget, and we're not trying to make it this magical thing, but it's just a lot of the time it's kind of a gut feeling. I can sense almost the color of the feeling that I want to express. and then the story starts to unfold. It's almost like the tension is there, and the tension has no word attached to it yet. And so then it's like, then you follow the associations to that tension. Like, what is this feeling, this question that I want to ask the universe? What does it remind me of? Oh, it reminds me of that time when I was 6 or whatever. And then the story comes with, autobiographical elements woven in by wherever that leads me. So yeah, it's really a mix, and it's all this. It's never, I want to write a story about a horse. It's, I want to write a story about this thing that I can't, but a horse has to be part of it, Yeah, I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about animals in your stories, but I'll let other people ask questions instead. Because you have a lot of them.
We do have a great question directed at both of you, and I think there may be some common threads here. But Deirdre asks, how has parenthood influenced your writing?
You go first this time, Jen.
Okay. Wow, that's a great question, and it's a very big answer. I'll try to just give you the beginning of that answer, which is the oh shit moment, where my second child was born, and I'm sitting in the hospital with her, completely smitten, but also nothing's going on. And so I realized that there is no more time left, none. And in my day-to-day, I had 2 very small children under the age of 2. And so I knew that it wasn't going to happen for me, that I had to start writing in every moment, in every like little, nook and cranny of my time. So children kind of motivated me actually to get the work done, and so many other elements, but I'll just give you the beginning of that.
Yeah, it was also, a little bit like my poem Misconception was about that, like a change understanding of who my first, I think I was always prioritizing my writing in some way for just many years, just mentally, secretly in myself. And I felt like I had to give that up for a while. Like for a couple of years after each child, I just really didn't write much, or I guess I wrote this during, while I was 3.5 years, but it felt like I didn't have time, even though, I'd done many things. I could do like a job and be writing a dissertation and still feel like I could write many pages a day, but I no longer felt that. I think partly I probably turned more towards poetry. I do also write fiction, and I think it was easier to write shorter things and feel like I could get some completion of something when I had young children. But I also feel like my understanding of the world got richer, and things were not just about me. And so and the bigger answer is that I feel like I became a better person in some way, and was able to be a better writer in that sense after having children.
Thank you. One more question, and I think one that is interesting because both of you proofread your own works, but also Rebecca, you've done some editing yourself. Annie asks, do you ever feel that your editing choices, whether proofreading or working with somebody else's work, might be compromising? And if so, how do you proceed, and if necessary, make peace with that?
Do you want me to go, Genevieve?
Yeah.
I maybe she means self-editing also, I'm not sure, but sometimes, I guess I worked with an editor on the book, and there would be things that he would feel were not clear, or and often it would be grammatical things that I would have to wrestle with, not realizing that it just wasn't clear to someone else what I was trying to say. And within a poem, that can be really hard to fix without kind of starting over. And so often I would if there was really a problem in a poem, sometimes I would have to really reconceive and really maybe rewrite the whole first half of it, in order not to feel like I compromised in some way. Like, I have to get back into that original creative mindset, or else it would come out like a patchwork. I think it's probably, but in the end, it was always I've never had a relationship where I couldn't have the final say with an editor. So if I insisted on something being kept, then that it would be kept. But I also learned very much to listen to other people, because their response is genuine, and it gives me real information about the poem. So I guess that's my answer.
Yeah, I think one way that I stop myself from editing myself when it's too soon is by writing by hand. It's so easy to be typing and then to press backspace. No. Then to just keep going. I think I'm been really lucky to have such a close relationship with my editor, Lee Newman, who's also a fantastic writer, and I just love her work. Sometimes I've worked on 2 books now with her, and sometimes I hear her voice in my head while I'm writing something new, and so that's always something to embrace and to also work around. I think I'm answering the question. It was how we don't. I don't know. I don't know if I answered the question.
Yeah, the question was specifically about, so let me pull it up again. Do you ever feel that your editing choices, and Annie clarified that she wanted to know about self-editing
Yeah.
while writing, do you ever feel that your editing choices might be compromising? And if so, how do you proceed, and if necessary, make peace with that compromise?
Yeah, it's a lot for me. For me, editing is voices in my head, whether they're my own voice telling me, no, you shouldn't say that, or an editor that I've worked with. And usually if it's an editor that I've worked with, that voice is much more generous and guiding. But to have the creation or the creativity really flow, you really have to have nobody's voice in your head. So it's tricky sometimes.
I will just also add that for me, it's a matter of letting time pass, because if you do edit something, you can see later sometimes that you've marred it. And I always keep past drafts, because sometimes I can see where I took the life out of something and didn't realize it at the time.
Yeah, thanks for pointing that out. That's true too.
Thank you both. That was a great answer. From all kinds of fronts. It definitely gave me pause on a couple of things to think about. I'd love to ask you both. I know we talked a little bit about Genevieve's upcoming novel, but what's next for each of you? What is on the horizon?
I'd like Rebecca to answer first. I'm sorry I had to put you on the spot, but I'd love to know.
Oh yeah, no, so I seem to always be about 10 years behind. Speaking of time, letting time pass. So I mean, I have I've been, as Genevieve knows, I have a short story collection that I keep reworking, but I've recently revised it and like where it is right now, and so I'll send that out. And I do have a 3rd poetry collection, but again, it seems like it takes several years from where I am to have something feel finished and right, and then if it's accepted somewhere, another year of working on it with an editor. But that's where I am right now. And then I think I will be writing more short stories right now than poems for a little while, if I can.
That's exciting. I'm looking forward to writing short stories again. I have the novel in the lobby of the Dream Hotel. I just handed a draft of a 2nd novel to my agent, and we'll just see what happens there. I think I got over ambitious during lockdown, and just it was my way of controlling my environment was to write another book. But I'm really excited to maybe start writing short stories again. Some that have been on kind of speaking to me in the fringes that really want to be told. Yeah.
I'm excited for all that. Yeah.
Thank you.
And likewise, we can't wait to see what's next from each of you. And we are so grateful to you for sharing the collections, these new collections with the world. So thank you again for joining us to talk about them tonight and for writing these wonderful books and having them out there. The books, of course, are Fetch Muse and Prepare Her. They're both available at the Norwich Bookstore. And in the chat, you'll find links to order these books. We can have them available on the shelves. We can ship them to you. We can have them available, set aside for porch pickup if you prefer not to come into the store. And either way, we really hope that you will pick these books up from us or from your local indie bookstore, wherever you might be, if you have one, elsewhere as well, and support your independent authors, your local authors, Vermont authors who are working hard and putting great work out there, and support your local bookstores as well. We're grateful for that support. It's what keeps us going. Rebecca, Genevieve, thank you so much for this evening and for joining us and talking about your work. And thank you everybody out there.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks for everyone for coming and for the little, I'm just reading this column of chats, and it's so lovely. Thank you.
Thank you guys.
Yeah. And wherever you are tonight, be good, be well, do good work, stay safe out there, read good books, and we'll see you next time. Thank you very much.